bringing wet and windy weather. But into the beginning of next week, that moves down into the Mediterranean and high pressure will build across the UK. The winds eventually dropping in southern areas. We'll all get lighter winds, quieter, drier weather and some sunshine.
Get the BBC News app for breaking news live as it happens. Personalise the app to get your news your way. From local stories to global headlines. Stay up to date with the news that matters. BBC News. Download the app.
Be ready. Change can happen in an instant. Check on the BBC Weather app.
At 10 in the eye of the storm, 3 million people in Wales and the southwest of England are urged to stay indoors as Storm Dara approaches. An emergency alert is issued on a scale never seen before to mobile phones in the areas that could be worst hit.
As the weather picks up here in Porthcawl this evening, by the morning the entire west and south coast of Wales will be within that red weather warning where wind speeds could reach 90 miles an hour.
Also tonight, Islamist rebels take more ground in Syria. After the fall of another city, fighters advance deeper into territory under President Assad's control. New footage of the suspect in the murder of a top businessman in New York as police reveal the type of gun they say could have been used. A deal is reached to sell The Observer, the world's oldest Sunday newspaper, despite protests from its own journalists. And the Princess of Wales hosts her annual Christmas Carol service as she continues her return to royal duties after cancer treatment.
And stay with us here on BBC News for continuing coverage and analysis from our team of correspondents in the UK and around the world.
Hello there. 3 million people living in Wales and the southwest of England have been urged to stay indoors as Storm Dara approaches. The emergency alert, a text message warning of possible danger, was issued this evening on a scale never seen before to the mobile phones of those living in the areas that could be worst hit. Well, amber weather warnings are in place, meaning widespread disruption all the way along the west coast of the UK, from southern Scotland to Cornwall and Northern Ireland. But the most serious threat is to South Wales and the Bristol Channel, where a rare red warning for strong winds has been issued, meaning there's a danger to life. Well, Nick Johnson will be reporting for us tonight from Weston-super-Mare, but first to Thomas Morgan, who's in Porthcawl. Thomas, this part of Wales already badly soaked by Storm Bert. Now they're having to brace for another lashing.
Yeah, you're right. They're not really recovered in the South Wales Valley since 2 weeks ago when Storm Bert was here. And now across the South Wales coastline and the entire West Wales coastline, they're getting ready for another storm, Storm Dara. We've been speaking to businesses across this afternoon. Many are making the difficult decision to miss out on a payday on a Saturday so close to Christmas and close due to the weather expected tomorrow. You might be able to hear behind me, we're here in the marina and the weather is lashing through the sails which have been wrapped up here because in the morning wind speeds could reach 90 miles per hour and the Met Office is warning there could be flying debris and damage to buildings from the early hours. From Penarth to Porthcawl, along the Welsh coastline, businesses have been busy planning and preparing for more bad weather.
At the moment, the plans are to be in because we've got deliveries for our customers and stuff like that. Some of them are elderly, so we need to get out to make sure that they're getting stuff. But other than that, that's all I've got on the cards at the moment.
Although towns on Welsh coastlines are familiar with bad weather, having to close shops and cafes on a Saturday so close to Christmas will undoubtedly affect businesses. Metres away from the seafront is Piccolo's Cafe, who earlier made the difficult decision to close tomorrow.
Sea defences keeps the water down, but there's a lot of debris comes up and it's the winds more than anything. You know, sometimes you can feel the glass shaking.
2 weeks ago, when Storm Bert ravaged the South Wales valleys and caused severe flooding, there was criticism by residents and politicians that stronger warnings didn't come soon enough. Tonight, the government has issued its largest ever use of its warning alert system, sent to the mobile phones of 3 million or so people living in the affected areas, where a rare red warning for wind, the Met Office's highest category for bad weather, has been issued across the entire west and south coast of Wales and along the Bristol Channel.
And they basically mean danger to life, big impacts, but not just that, it also expresses certainty. So that means that Met Office is confident that these severe conditions will be affecting and quite a large area.
As Wales gets ready to defend itself once more, the miserable weather in the run-up to the festive period continues. Well, this evening, Cardiff Airport said that it will be closed tomorrow morning from the early hours until the red warning comes to an end at around 11 a.m. Several local Christmas events have been closed and shut down tomorrow in preparation for the bad weather. And the Football Association of Wales and the Welsh Rugby Union have cancelled all community games across the country tomorrow. Now, as I mentioned there, the red warning comes to an end at around 11 a.m. There is still an amber alert for rain that covers most of Wales, and that'll be in place until the end of the day. So there's no sign of it letting up anytime soon.
Indeed, we're going to go to Nick Johnson now, who's live in Weston-super-Mare in Somerset, also in that red wind warning zone, Nick.
Yeah, and Clive, we received that emergency alert to our phones here in the southwest just before 7 p.m. We spoke to some people in a bar a short time ago who described the noise, the surprise when everyone inside that bar received the notification at the same time. Now, Weston-super-Mare faces down the Bristol Channel behind me, which is where some of those strongest winds are forecast for the early hours. Businesses along the seafront here have taken extra precautions by battening down some of their outdoor furniture, but also saying that they're going to open much later tomorrow. But Avon and Somerset Police have urged people to stay away from the coastline here wherever possible. Now, GWR, that's the train company which runs services through southwest England and parts of South Wales, have urged passengers to change their travel plans over the weekend wherever possible. Bristol Airport has warned passengers to expect disruption tomorrow, and as you heard, Cardiff Airport in the last couple of hours has said it will be closing its runway between 3 a.m. and 11 a.m. Any passengers due to fly from Cardiff, it says, should get in touch with their airline. Clive.
All right, Nick, thank you. Nick Johnson there, live in Weston-super-Mare, and Thomas Morgan in Porthcawl in South Wales. Many thanks. Now, tens of thousands of people are fleeing the Syrian city of Homs as rebel Islamist fighters close in. And the speed at which the armed opposition is advancing across the country has astonished everyone, with the Syrian army, loyal to President Assad, simply falling away. The civil war began in 2011, but the rebels with links to Al-Qaeda were forced into retreat 5 years later. Now they're back, and in just 10 days have taken the whole of Syria's second largest city of Aleppo. Another major city, Hama, fell yesterday. And now in their sights is Homs. Success there could see the main road from the capital Damascus to the Syrian coast cut, dividing the stronghold of President Assad. His lightning loss of territory due to his backers, including Russia, Iran and Hezbollah, currently fighting in other conflicts. Well, with all the latest from the Turkey-Syria border, here's Hugo Bachega.
Syrian rebels on their way to Homs. Their offensive has been swift and astonishing. Here they celebrate as they capture another town without facing any resistance. They also had no opposition in Hama. Chanting "God is greatest," crowds gathered to welcome the fighters. They also seized this army base, a symbolic win as the military struggles to counter their progress. The civil war in Syria started in 2011 when President Bashar al-Assad crushed protests against his regime. Homs, a rebel stronghold, was under siege for 3 years. Opposition fighters only left under a deal brokered by the UN in 2015, and government forces reclaimed it.
If the rebels take Homs, Damascus, the capital, would be quite an easier target. The Syrian army has folded, that the state capacity has been degraded a great deal. The writing on the wall.
Frozen for years, the front lines in Syria are changing fast. This is an insurgency led by Islamist rebels from a group known as HTS. They have their roots in Al-Qaeda, but are trying to rebrand themselves as a nationalist force. From their base in Idlib, they launched a surprise campaign last week. They took Aleppo, the country's second largest city, and continued to push south. This is their leader, Abu Mohammed al-Jalani. In an interview to CNN, he said the goal was to topple the regime and bring back Syrian refugees.
People will return to their homes. Many refugees in Turkey will likely return, as will a significant number of refugees in Lebanon and Jordan. Even refugees in Europe may return to rebuild their country.
They are vowing to reach Damascus, and Bashar al-Assad is struggling to stop them. In the past, he relied heavily on Russia and Iran to fight the opposition. But both allies are preoccupied with their own affairs. The rebels have the momentum, and the regime is increasingly under threat. And tonight, rebels are claiming to have reached the city limits of Homs, and they've made a final call on forces loyal to the government to defect. But it's not only those fighters who are making progress. Kurdish forces have essentially taken control of the eastern desert after government troops abandoned their positions. And there are also local insurgencies in the south of the country. So without significant help from Russia and Iran, President Assad seems unable to stop this offensive against his government. And many are saying that this could be the beginning of the end of his regime. Clive?
Yeah, what a transformation in Syria's fortunes. All right, Hugo, thank you. Hugo Bachega there, live on the Turkey-Syria border. Romania's constitutional court has annulled the first round of voting in the country's presidential election, in which the surprise winner was a far-right candidate who previously supported Russia's Vladimir Putin. The court ruling came after intelligence documents suggested Călin Georgescu was backed by a mass social media campaign conducted from abroad. He's now accusing Romania's establishment of subverting democracy. Well, Sarah Rainsford is live in the capital, Bucharest. Sarah, what is the evidence of this mass social media campaign being conducted from abroad?
Well, you know, this has been a really dramatic couple of weeks in Romanian politics, and it's been topped off, Clive, with this really shocking decision by the Constitutional Court. You're asking what it's based on. Well, it's based on declassified intelligence that was released essentially to the public earlier this week in an attempt to show that Russia, which is not identified directly but very, very strongly hinted at, had essentially conducted a massive influence campaign using TikTok to try to warp the results of this vote. Now, it used TikTok, we're told, because that is exactly where Călin Georgescu, the main man at the heart of all of this, was campaigning. He said he spent nothing, he had no other traditional kind of election campaigning. That's where he was. And users that we've spoken to here in Bucharest have told me about how they were bombarded with content promoting Georgescu, even someone who was of no other interest to them. They'd never heard of him before. And he was very nearly elected here. He was heading to a second round vote on Sunday, but now that entire election has been cancelled. Very controversial, but Mr. Georgescu, although he's complained about it, hasn't called people out in protest yet. He's called on people to stay calm. He said change will still come to Romania, but this, as far as he's concerned, is the end of the electoral path.
Fascinating. All right, Sarah, thank you. Sarah Rainsford there, live in Bucharest. Many thanks. Police in New York say it's now a multi-state manhunt in the search for the killer of the boss of a major health insurance company. New images of the suspect in the murder have been released as detectives revealed the type of gun they believe was used. Brian Thompson was killed in what's being described as a targeted attack. Nada Tawfiq has the latest from New York.
New video shows the suspected assailant walking along 55th Street and putting something on a pile of trash bags. This was minutes after he purchased items at a Starbucks with cash.
Hi, I'm Brian Thompson.
And less than half an hour before he shot United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson.
Our mission and values are focused on helping people live healthier lives.
This image, caught on surveillance camera, shows the suspect standing at the check-in desk at a hostel where he reportedly shared a room with two other men. In a flirtatious moment, he pulls down his mask to show the receptionist his smile and reveals his full face. This breakthrough in the case here at the American Youth Hostel on Manhattan's Upper West Side has given police new leads. These brothers, who live in Italy, say they were staying on the same floor as the suspect.
It was a weird coincidence that it was exactly that night. It feels a bit crazy still, but the next day, the whole night, we had a police officer staying on our floor for our safety, or we don't know, maybe he was also waiting for him to come back.
We now know that the person of interest in this case checked into this hostel using a fake ID after arriving here on a bus from a state south of the city 10 days before the shooting. This has now turned into a multi-state manhunt.
The fatal shooting of Brian Thompson in Midtown Manhattan, just as he was about to give an investor talk, felt like a scene out of a Hollywood movie. It's led other major corporations to reevaluate their safety.
No one's going like crazy thinking that immediately, this is an attack against all CEOs, but it is making everyone reevaluate.
Police have not yet recovered the suspect's distinctive backpack or gun. According to our U.S. partner CBS, police believe the crime weapon was a B&T Station 6. This video demonstrates why a handgun like this might have been chosen to carry out murder in a built-up part of Manhattan where a gunshot would echo.
Very, very quiet.
New York officials insist the investigation is on the right track. For now, though, the suspect is still at large and his identity unknown.
The New York Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch says they now believe the suspect has left New York City. They're actually in possession of video that shows him taking a cab to the Port Authority bus terminal, going inside but never coming out. They say they believe he has now left. In the meantime, they're flying drones over Central Park, where they believe he discarded his backpack.
Nada, thank you. Nada Tawfiq there, live in New York. And Paddy will be looking ahead to Donald Trump's visit to Paris on Newsnight on BBC Two shortly. Hi there, Paddy.
Clive, you're right. We're calling it Donald diplomacy. We'll preview the events at Notre Dame tomorrow. And back home, how to avoid the quad-demic. That's all on Newsnight, on iPlayer, BBC News and BBC Two at 10:30.
Thanks, Paddy. Now, the Archbishop of Canterbury, who's stepping down, has had to apologise after his farewell speech in the House of Lords yesterday was branded as tone-deaf. Justin Welby was found by an independent review to have had a moral and personal responsibility to have done more to stop a prolific child abuser who ran camps for young evangelical Christians. But the Archbishop's speech yesterday was criticised by abuse survivors. Well, Ali Maqbool is here. So what exactly did he say to offend?
Yes, as a reminder, he resigned because that report said he could and should have done more when it came to the abuse of a man called John Smythe. Well, yesterday in his speech, he started by saying, if you pity anyone, pity my diary secretary, and actually didn't mention abuse victims at all in his speech. He did say it was clear his head had to roll, but then he followed it up with this.
I hope not literally. One of my predecessors in 1371, Simon of Sudbury, had his head cut off, and it was then the peasants, the revolting peasants at the time, played football with it at the Tower of London. I don't know who won.
Unsurprisingly, that went down badly with abuse victims who condemned the frivolous tone of it. So Justin Welby has now said sorry. He said, I'd like to apologise wholeheartedly for the hurt that my speech has caused, and said it wasn't intended to overlook the experience of survivors or make light of the situation. Not only that, 3 bishops, the 3 lead safeguarding bishops for the Church of England, also felt they had to apologise for Justin Welby's speech. They said both in content and delivery, the speech was utterly insensitive. So all in all, a very embarrassing episode.
Indeed. All right, Ali, thank you. Ali Maqbool, our religion editor. Now, families of children operated on by a disgraced surgeon have called independent reports into their care the final insult. Yasser Jabber, a former surgeon at London's Great Ormond Street Hospital, carried out procedures such as leg lengthening and straightening, but some cases linked to him resulted in lifelong injuries and even amputations. The families say the independent reviews don't accurately reflect their children's treatment and have dubbed them a whitewash. Great Ormond Street has apologised for what happened, saying the reviews follow NHS guidelines. Here's Hugh Pym.
Bunty was referred to Yasser Jabbar for surgery to lengthen her leg because of a bone condition. In May 2020, after a series of failed operations, her lower left leg was amputated.
He'd tell me every operation was a complete success. I've done this, I've done that, and then none of them worked, none of them worked, none of them worked. And it ended up with him amputating her leg.
So this was when Ella's legs were at their worst?
Claire's daughter Ella has a rare bone condition, which led to referral for a series of operations to realign her knees as she grew up. The first operation worked, but then she switched to Yasser Jabbar.
This was how Mr. Jabbar's surgery had left her. She went from walking for miles to, Mummy, I can't walk around the supermarket. And it was that point we had to make the choice to get a wheelchair for her because she just refused to walk through pain.
Concerns about Jabbar led to a damning report from the Royal College of Surgeons. He's no longer practising in the UK. The report found some of the surgery had been inappropriate and incorrect, and the working environment was toxic. In response, the hospital commissioned independent reviews for all of Jabbar's 723 patients. So far, around 10% of families have had their personal reviews back, but several are unhappy.
It's just a smoke screen to cover up what really went on, and I don't know, as I say, the guy that wrote that one, he hasn't considered Bunty at all. He's just looked at a load of x-rays. We've never been called in once. We've never been interviewed. Independent report should cover everybody.
Our review itself, I feel, missed out a lot of important information about Ella's personal journey. I don't feel that mine was a true reflection of Ella's story. So what am I now waiting for? Because what's the next step? No one has told us what happens now.
In a statement, Great Ormond Street Hospital said, "We want every patient and family who comes to our hospital to feel safe and cared for, and we are deeply sorry. We commissioned an independent review of patient care, which is in line with NHS England guidelines. We completely appreciate that for families who've experienced pain and distress, these findings may never feel adequate."
You're the one who's seen them suffering. You're the one.
Claire says she knows of other families who share her concerns. For both Claire and Dean, there will always be a lingering sense of guilt.
When you sign a consent form for your child to go down for surgery, you hand that child's life over to a surgeon. You give their life over to someone else. And then as a parent, you lie in bed and you think, was I right to do that? Have I made a mistake?
I feel that I failed her as a dad sometimes. Should have gotten to him earlier, should have pulled her out, should have got a second opinion, maybe took her to someone else. We just put our trust in them and it's been completely thrown back in our faces.
Hugh Pym, BBC News.
A giant sinkhole that forced residents from their homes in Merthyr Tydfil in Wales earlier this week has got even bigger. Now, with Storm Dara expected to bring more wet and windy weather, residents hoping to return to their homes this weekend have been told they'll have to wait a little longer. Here's Hal Griffith.
Day by day, the problems deepen as everyone searches for a solution to this spreading hole. The first cracks emerged on Saturday. By Sunday, 29 homes were evacuated. An army of engineers moved in to stop water flowing underground. Idris had been told he could return home today, but Storm Dara has sunk those plans. Homes are still without power.
They have said, a couple of days, but you never know, do you? So you've got to prepare perhaps for the worst.
Preparing for the worst, you seem to be taking this in good humour.
I think what you have to realise is that when the people were evacuated, there was nobody who was seriously injured. So yes, we haven't got the house, the bungalow to live in. We're not in our usual place, but we're all safe.
The scale of this operation is staggering, but what they're trying to do keeps changing because of the weather. Initially, these cranes are brought in to lower a little digger into the hole to clear it out. But the high winds put paid to that, and now they're trying to get a pipeline in there to cope with all the water they expect to flow over the weekend. It's yet another headache for the council as they try to reassure people their houses are secure.
I think for residents looking at it as well, they'll be thinking that our property's going to go, or, you know, it's got to be in the back of their minds.
Not least for the owners of this house, the bungalow at the brink with a disappearing driveway. Ruth and Simon had been renting it out to friends.
As the last couple of days, the sinkhole has got larger, hasn't it?
Mm.
And the water is coming in, and
so there is that fear that it could all fall in.
It could.
I think that's, you know, anyone would fear, and I think the neighbours feel exactly the same.
The hope is some of those neighbours will return before Christmas, but the crater has already ripped up many festive plans. Howell Griffith, BBC News, Merthyr Tydfil.
A deal has been reached to sell the world's oldest Sunday newspaper, The Observer, to the news website and podcast producer Tortoise Media. Tortoise says it recognises the awesome sense of responsibility ahead, but the National Union of Journalists has warned its members will be angry and extremely disappointed by the decision. Here's David Silliter.
The Observer has been part of British life for 233 years. One of its first stories was the death of Mozart. But the news that it's being sold to a news website, Tortoise Media, has provoked fury from its staff. But the trust that owns The Guardian and The Observer thinks two brands is one too many.
What we want to do in The Guardian is focus on The Guardian, and we want The Observer to have a management, a board that is focused on The Observer, on building it as a brand, particularly as a digital brand.
Are you just offloading a dying brand?
No, not at all. We would not have made this decision if we didn't think this was by far the best option, the best route for The Observer to have a strong future.
Founded in 1791, The Observer has a long legacy as a liberal voice in British journalism. And the view here amongst the bosses is that this is the best way of preserving that. But there are many journalists here who have their doubts.
We believe it's the death of The Observer. We believe there is no long-term future for it at Tortoise.
It's been taken on, there's a promise of investment. How is this a problem?
We believe that something really vital and precious is being lost, which is a 233-year-old newspaper being put out in the rubbish, essentially, because there is not a business plan here that can work.
James Harding, a former boss of BBC News and ex-editor of The Times, is the man behind Tortoise Media. He's promised to keep The Observer's presses running and to invest £25 million. but many on the paper have concerns.
I think it's been furtively done in conditions of extreme secrecy, as I say, and with enormous haste, so it feels as if we are being bundled out of the door.
The sale is going to be fought, but that word sale, this is a deal in which the Scott Trust will actually be giving money to Tortoise to take the Observer off its hands. David Soletto, BBC News.
The Princess of Wales has been hosting her annual Christmas Carol service at Westminster Abbey this evening. It's been a tough year after cancer treatment, while the King is still under the care of cancer specialists. Here's Daniela Ralph.
It was a family affair for a princess who has spent much of the year out of the public eye. With her husband and 3 children, she hosted her annual carol service at Westminster Abbey. As the princess met some of those performing at the service, she acknowledged it had been a difficult few months.
I didn't know this year was going to be the year that I've just had. The unplanned. The unplanned, exactly. Yeah.
Before the service started, the princess spent time with the guests. 1,600 were invited to the Abbey, including Sir Chris Hoy, who recently announced his cancer was terminal. The theme of the service was love, empathy and kindness. Every person here was invited because they'd supported their community in some way or faced their own challenges.
I wrote to her to...
18-year-old Olivia Bowditch helps a charity that sends letters of support to cancer patients. Earlier this year, she wrote to the Princess of Wales.
In a world where we see the royal family from a distance, it's really important to remember that these are just people. And so I said, I really hope you're okay. I understand this is a really difficult time for you, and I hope you kind of take the quiet that you need to spend time with your family and your children and your husband.
For the Princess of Wales, this carol service was both a public duty and something more personal. She was here not just as a member of the royal family, but as someone who has overcome her own struggles this year, like so many of the guests. For Lindsay Burrow, this will be her first Christmas without her husband Rob. The rugby league player died in June from motor neurone disease. Her invitation to the carol service, a recognition of her courage.
It's those tough times that kind of bring people together, and I think particularly this time of year, for many families it's a difficult time, so I think to be here and surrounded by so much kindness, which is what the service was about, was truly special.
The royal family has much to reflect on this Christmas after a turbulent 2024. This carol service was a celebration of those people around us who help us through the darkest times. Daniela Ralph, BBC News, Westminster Abbey.
And if you want to continue watching the BBC News at 10, please turn over to BBC One, or you can watch on iPlayer. Next, it's Newsnight.
Donald Trump's back on the world stage. Will he preach peace to President Zelensky from the majestic Notre Dame? And the 4 horses of the quaddemic, how one hospital is already past 100% of emergency beds. Hello, welcome to Newsnight, home of interviews and insight. A rare diplomatic moment opens this weekend in the historic Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. Donald Trump strides back onto the world stage there in his first overseas trip since